O Lord, you have been our dwelling place through all generations. Before the mountains were born, long before your creation, you are God, our dwelling place. You are God, our dwelling place. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. For 1,000 years in your sight are like a day that has gone by. As morning grass withers by evening, our days soon pass and we fly away. So teach us to number our days. Let us gain hearts of wisdom. May your favor rest upon us. Show your glory to our children. Oh Lord, you have been our dwelling place through all generations. Before the mountains were born, long before your creation, you are God, our dwelling place. You are God, our dwelling place. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. 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 You are God. You are God.
Welcome to Plain Talk About Life in the Bible. I'm glad you could tune in this week. I want to say hello to Judge again, and to Cecilia, and to Miss Sasha in particular, and to the Blacks, Heidi and Gordon and Winnetka, who were kind enough to call and say they saw it, and I appreciate that. I've been thinking this whole week about Demas. When we left Pilgrim's Progress last time, Demas, who's really a character in the Bible from 2 Timothy chapter 4, who was a compadre of the Apostle Paul's, who Paul says near the end of his life, Demas departed. Demas left him for love of this world. And it's so easy to look down our noses at Demas. And in Pilgrim's Progress, Bunyan puts Demas as a man here who says, well, there's a silver mine here, and tries to draw aside our friends, meaning Christian and hopeful, as they're on their way to the celestial city. And Christian is kind of rough and rebuking Demas. And it says here, Demas tries to defend himself and says, well, Christian says, how many have there been slain? And besides, that treasure is a snare to those that seek it, for it hindereth them in their pilgrimage. In other words, if you and I are really on our way to heaven, if we're passing through this world, as I'm always saying we are, why aren't we traveling lightly? Why are we always burdening ourselves with things like silver and gold and houses and lands, things that, if you remember, were fit for Vanity Fair, but not fit for a pilgrim? Someone traveling through here would seem like they would travel lightly. Demas responds by saying, Well, they're not very dangerous except to those that are careless. But Bunyan cleverly adds, but wherewithal he blushed as he said these things. Every man who proclaims on the one hand to be a Christian, and with the other hand turns around and tells you to love the things of this world, is not your friend, and certainly is no Christian, as Demas was not. Now, Demas will maintain he's a Christian, even through this discourse, but certainly you can see that neither the Apostle Paul nor Bunyan believed him to be one. Why? If you remember the scripture, it says, do not love the world nor the things of this world. Why? Well, the things of this world are passing away. They are not really, you can't have a great love for God and a great love for the things of this world. Now, last week I was sitting in a pub and somebody started asking me questions and we had a nice conversation. And finally they said, well, your life sounds successful. And I thought about it a minute and I realized the help that you've been, meaning you who watch, and allowing me to say these things, it's changed me. A little over a year ago, I might have thought that man was right, that my life was successful. About that time, maybe 15 months ago, I had a chance to really think about my life. And I said to him, you know, my life's really been a failure. I consider it to be something not quite as bad as an abject failure, but a failure. And he said, well, I don't understand that. And I said, well, here I've been talking to you about these things, and I've forgotten the overarching thing that I need to remember, which is one of the things that really made my life a failure as I look backwards at it is that I was pretty good at making money. Whenever I would get money, God was gracious enough to always take it away from me. He would allow somebody to come and take it from me, whether they should have or whether they were righteous and they're taking it away was another matter. But God governed those things, and He didn't prohibit them from taking away from me. And I spent a lot of the hours that I had on this earth making money. And I liked it, and I did fairly well at it, so it occupied more of my time than it ever should have. And in that respect, I consider myself to be a failure because it's very inconsequential, as I've learned in this last year, whether or not you're a rich man or a poor man. Life is so short. Today I read where Job said that his life was like a shutter weaver or whatever, like a rug weaver is what he meant. When you take it from one side of the loom to the other, and he was saying, well, that's the length of my life. It's so inconsequential what I wear or what I own here. And I tell my wife all the time, about that 15-month ago point, I sat down and said to myself, look, how will you value everything 5 minutes after you're dead? And I realized I should have been asking myself that since I was 20 years old. How will I value anything? Will I value my wife? Yes, after I'm dead, I'll still value her. Will I value my own soul? Yes, after I'm dead 5 minutes. But 5 minutes after I'm dead, will I care that I lived in this church in Loami, Illinois? No. It served its purpose. It kept me out of the rain. It gave me a comfortable place to work and a nice environment, but really it's inconsequential whether I live here or a mobile home on Peoria Road. None of that is very important. It doesn't matter whether I drive a new car or an old one. It doesn't matter whether I have money in the bank or don't. I guarantee it's easier to go through this life if you do. I'm not disputing that, but it's so short. It's the difference between flying to Europe coach or flying first class. There's a difference, but it's still just an 8-hour flight, and you're in out of the rain. It is not a dramatic difference how you travel through this world, whether you eat at McDonald's or you eat at Ruth Chris's Steakhouse. You're only going to eat so many meals. So I've wasted a lot of my life, and about 15 months ago, I realized making these shows that I was wasting my life, and I wanted that to change. And one of the really wonderful things you start asking yourself, for what trinkets am I exchanging time? In other words, what trinkets am I wanting so desperately that I give my life up for them and my hours up for them? Because that's really when you work or strive after anything, you're really giving away a part of your life for it, so it better be important. And I realized I was selling out pretty cheaply. I bet you are too. I bet you sold out for a medium-sized house, a old Buick, and a medium-sized dream. It really is pathetic what people will do. Some people will steal for it. Some people will cheat their business for it, just so they can drive a little better, send their kid to a better school, whatever it might be. It's very sad. I realized that sadness was about me. So I attempted to change. And one of the things God did in His kindness was also let me be introduced to people I should have met 40 years ago, people like Henry David Thoreau, other philosophers that I missed out on early in life. And I read something that Thoreau said, not only about exchanging your time, which is what you really have in this world, for work or a career, which he was unwilling to do because he wanted to follow his heart's pursuits, which swayed me greatly. Even though I don't consider him to be a godly man, he was a very wise man. But he also said, here's what I want to do with my life. I want to simplify it, and I want to elevate my purpose. Now think about that as a philosophy, even from a man who has not understood the drama that goes on in history that is God's history. This man was still wise enough to say, I want to simplify my life and elevate my purpose. And I realized, well, that's something I could do. I could simplify my life and elevate my purpose. And I've been attempting to do that ever since. Now, I don't know if I've been successful yet, but I've been more successful than I have been. And I'm wondering about you. What are your treasures? My treasures have changed. I fully expect to go to heaven. I fully expect to enjoy the presence of God there. I also expect to work hard here now to get there. It's a short time here, a long time there. I've tried to make my treasures now be the treasures of the next world. They weren't really even a year ago, even though I hoped they would be. I was more like Demas. I was a man who said I was a believer because I believed, but I was a man whose life would lead you to believe that he might not be a believer, that he could walk away and serve the world. Luckily, that God was gracious enough and I didn't do that. But think about your life. What are you giving your time to? What have you given your heart to? Is it really 5 minutes after you're dead? What will it mean to you that you owned 480 acres? What difference could it possibly make to you 5 minutes after you're dead? When you're fixed either in heaven or hell, 5 minutes after you're dead, you will be one or the other. What difference could it make whether you left here empty-handed or whether you left here with a pile of goods that somebody else has to inherit and fight over? The one thing that you're reminded of is that you won't be in possession of any of the things that you are now in possession of 5 minutes after you're dead. If you can find me somebody who's escaped death, I'll skip this conversation. If you can't, then each of you faces that no matter how you ignore it. We all have that moment coming. So I want you to let that sink in a minute. 5 minutes after I'm dead, how will I view the things that are now in my eyes? And see if you were like me. Maybe your life's been a failure too, meaning maybe you've just been no good at anything except making money. Maybe what's worse, maybe you've made money and a lot of friends. Maybe that's all. People often say to me, well, Bill, I didn't make any money in life, but I made a lot of friends. And I say, well, I met your friends. I think you're probably poor for having that particular group of friends. They haven't done your soul any good. Remember, friends are only counted friends as they're good for your soul. Think about that. When I come back, I'll stress that just a little bit more. Thanks.